Well, hello again. It's a nice warm day again today, so we're going to go out to the old garage and see if we can't get that axle out from underneath that Thunderbird. Tell you what, just before we jump out into the garage, I'll give you a quick update on what's been going on with the Zenith. The radio does make sound now. It comes on. The problem is the sound is a motorboat, a mild to low motorboating. So, you know, after I get the axle out from under the Thunderbird, and I'm going to take a few days and spend it strictly on the radio. This thing did not have an original Zenith tube shield, so I had to adapt one off of a Atwater Kent. Somebody would have mentioned that or caught that right away. Oh, that's not a Zenith. Yeah, well, I know these things, okay? Well, anyway, we're going to try to get this baby to make some really good sound before it's over. A couple of more little items before we actually get going. This is the shackle that's on the rear, the very end of the leaf spring on the loop right there. One on each end of the car. And you'll notice that that thing is supposed to slip over there real nice and be floppy loose, that bar. Well, the other one's not quite like that. Let me show you. Here's the other one. Bent out. And I can't get the bar or the strap to go across. So I'm going to have to take it into the shop where I used to work, ask one of our maintenance guys if he can put it in the vise and straighten it out. I don't think it'll take too much. I think it's nice and sturdy. I mean, there's no rust, no pitting, none of that other garbage on there. I don't think it's the bar. It might be. We'll have to determine that once I get it in there. Also, for you guys who have Thunderbirds, 1966s, this is the spring clip or the U-bolt. This is 8 inches from the bottom of the bolt up to the inside of the top right here. If you have an original like this. On this car, it's 8 inches, and then it's 3 inches inside surface to inside surface. And this rod, or the tube that it's made out of, the rod that it's made out of is 1/2 inch. So we have 1/2 inch, then we have 3 inches, and then 8 inches. And I'll show you later on where those dimensions will come in handy. Here's the plan of attack. The first thing you have to do is disconnect your emergency brake cables that come into the rear of the brakes. They've got to come out. If I'd have known I was going to go ahead and change the or pull out the leaf springs this early, I would have never hooked them up. But I'll have to pull the drums, disconnect the brake emergency brake cable, and let it dangle on both sides. Then I have to disconnect the drive shaft. The drive shaft has to be disconnected. And then the shocks. There's a shock on each side that also has to be disconnected. Then we're going to lower it down. We're going to lower this one down and then go over there and lower that one down a little bit. We're going to do it evenly back and forth. I'm not just going to let it come down. We're going to lower it down on these little dollies that I bought. These mover dollies capable of holding 300 pounds apiece. I'll put a little pad in there like so. And we're going to let that thing just come right on down and sit right in that gully right there between those things. And then if all goes well, if that large round gear section of the axle, you know, the gear housing, if it clears the gas tank in the bottom of the car, we'll just wheel it right on out. If it doesn't, we'll have to pull it out this way. One way or another, that axle is coming out of there today. Well, already I've run into a small problem I hadn't noticed before. The mufflers on this car are on the back all the way to the rear. You've seen them. And the tailpipe runs over the top of the axle and then goes up to the front of the car. Comes around, runs over the top of the axle, and runs up. But unfortunately, it runs, I've never seen this before, but it runs at an angle like that. Okay? They don't go straight up like they should. They go from, after it clears the axle, they go at an angle like so. Sitting on top of that mess is our drive shaft. It comes down like so from the tail shaft on the transmission, and it comes down, it hooks to the rear end right here. So unfortunately, with these tailpipes running at an angle from the, once I disconnect the drive shaft from the rear end, I can't just drop it down. So what I'm going to have to do, you may run into this yourself. There's a yoke up here, and this is what goes into your transmission, and your tail shaft comes down like this to about right like that. This is your transmission. You have enough clearance here that once you disconnect the back of the drive shaft from the rear end, there's 4 bolts there. There are U-bolts. There's one on each side with a little flange, and they have a bolt that goes through with a nut. You'll see it once you get under there. Most cars are the same, but once I get it disconnected, I can shove that drive shaft forward in that direction toward the front of the car, and there's enough slack right here. It'll shove it up against the tail shaft on the transmission and clear it enough to where I'll set it down, but it won't be sitting on the floor. It'll be sitting on top of the tailpipes. Weird, huh? I'll show you that. Hopefully I'll be able to show you that in a minute, because I'm fixing to crawl in there and take these U-bolts and bolts out here that hold it on. I hope you can see that. See where the 2 pipes go at an angle together, and the drive shaft is sitting on top? All I can do is drop it down and it hits those pipes. That's kind of weird, but that's the way it is. I guess they wanted to clear the floorboards. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect these bolts right here. Shove that baby forward. Hopefully we'll knock off that mud wasp nest while we're at it. I'll tell you what, it's supposed to be 62 out here today, but it sure is windy too. Didn't say anything about that, or at least I didn't see it. Woo! For those of you who have an interest, these are the 2 holes. There's one here, one on the other side, and then there's these 2 here. Let me see if I can zoom in. Yep, there's a top and a bottom. The top hole set and a bottom hole set. And these U-bolts came out of there. The U-bolts came out from the bottom set. Where the heck am I? I lost it. There we go. Came out from the bottom set. They're just held in with a nut and a lock washer. 1/2 inch, by the way. They usually come loose pretty easily, and these did. So now the only thing holding that drive shaft in there is these things right here. These are the caps for the bearings, and what I need to do is get this thing out of there and shoved forward so it'll clear the pumpkin. So how do I do that? Well, we take a screwdriver here, we run it up in there, we just kind of pry it back like that. And while I'm holding it with the other hand, and don't get underneath these things. Some of them are very heavy. Most of them are pretty light, but some weigh a ton. So you got to kind of be careful. You know, if it decides it wants to drop, well, let it drop. So what? We can always get a brand new set of bearings and a brand new universal joint, all that stuff. Don't worry about it. I'll probably have to wind up putting new universal joints in this anyway. They don't cost that much. Why not? So let me see if I can clear this thing from the pumpkin and then shove the whole thing forward enough to clear it. Alright, she's dropped down. It cleared, it went forward and real about 1.5 inches actually. And I've got it sitting on the ground. It actually came on down through. What it did was the weight of the drive shaft split the pipes apart. I was worried about them damaging the pipe if that were to happen. Eventually, if I ever get this car on the road again, I want to drive it down to the muffler shop and have brand new pipes and mufflers put on it from front to rear. I don't want to be driving around town with you know, tremendous muffler sounds. Every cop in town would stop me. But anyway, there she sits at the end of the drive shaft. Let me see, I'm wiggling kind of hard under here, but this is your universal joint right here. Okay, these bearings here turn. These feel pretty good actually. And the ones on the bottom also turn nice and smooth, and this right here feels pretty good too, but I don't know. You know, I'm not about to keep those. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of them. They don't cost that much, like I said. You know, I've never seen a drive shaft where one was inside of another. I've seen 2-piece and even 3-piece, I think. But I've never seen one where it was inside of one another. That's kind of strange. But anyway, these are your universal. And underneath these caps will actually pull off, and there's this whole set of needle bearings all the way around the outside edge in all 4 of them. And you can usually feel a lot of grit and everything, or they just hardly turn at all when the needle bearings are messed up. These feel pretty good. Alright, let's go on to the next step. One more aspect about safety. I hate to keep harping on this, but we're dealing with parts right now that are extremely heavy. Okay, this is not your lightweight muffler or something like that. Yes, the car is still secure. I've got it on jack stands, 4 jack stands and 2 sets of boards. That's, you know, 6 things holding it up. It's a lot lighter now with the springs out of there. But once you start disconnecting the rear axle, you drop the drive shaft, you start and you pull off the brake line. The brake lines, I'll have to. The other side's already done. I got the emergency brake line. I'm going to do this side. Keep this in mind. Once you start disconnecting this thing from the car, it is freewheeling. It is no longer part of the car. So no matter how much support you have on the car, it does not matter to the axle. Watch. Now I've got all this stuff holding the car up. Now watch this axle, see? See how she swings back and forth? She's being suspended right now by the shocks only. And if it were to fall, let it fall. Don't get underneath it, okay? Do not get under anything that moves like this, all right? I don't care how much stuff you got underneath it. It could fall. If it falls, don't worry about it. Let it fall. You can always get a replacement axle. You cannot get a replacement If it moves, stay out from under it. Well, as you can see, once I released the shock on this side, it all rolled forward, just like I said it would in the last video. Matter of fact, it rolled so far forward and so fast that it actually took it right off the jack stand. So that's why you don't stay under it. It fell down off the jack stand, it hit the concrete, so what? Who cares? I got it jacked up right now again by the axle and with the little jack. And I've got my little dolly wheel under there with the cloth under it. And we're about to find out if my grand scheme, at least on this side, is going to work. Here we go. I positioned it, by the way, with the 2 rear wheels here and the single wheel there and this ridge right between them. So, will that work? I don't know. I may have to reposition them. Well, so far so good. Let's see what happens here. Oh, son of a gun, she might just do it. Once I get it down level, let's do the other side. Well, there it is, all out. Now, my brilliant idea about using those mover dolly wheels, it was a great idea. The problem was, it didn't work. So I had to go back to plan B and just roll it out on the hubs. That's what I did. Of course, it scuffed up the paint a little bit on the inside edge there. But it didn't matter. They're all out now. And it's starting to get really chilly. The temperature's going back down again. It's going to be really cold for the next, I think it's 4 or 5 days. So there won't be another video until then. Once we get it back up into the 60s around here, I'll come back out and we'll tear apart these leaf springs. So, and I'd like to have it warm enough to where I could power wash, the rear end and kind of start wire brushing that down too. The whole idea was to just get it out there and get it cleaned up and get all the crap off. So, I had the leaf springs out. Why not? So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. It was just a blast for me. It was a lot of fun. Unfortunately, the brakes had to come off both wheels again in order to get that emergency brake cable on each side out. But that's, small potatoes. We'll put them back together later. Until next time, which will be a little while, this is John. Oops, I almost forgot about those measurements I showed you on the U-bolts. If you go to Eaton, E-A-T-O-N, Detroit Spring Company, or Eaton Spring up in Detroit, you'll shop around and you'll come to this page right here. It deals with attaching parts. Now, I'm buying my springs from Eaton, and I'm also going to be buying the attaching parts. Well, what are attaching parts? Well, they're U-bolts. And I'll put the link to this page down in the body or underneath the video. And when you get here, all you have to do is come to this part right here. It says select product group. Go where it says bolts. Then over here, this will automatically light up, go down to where it says U-bolt. And that takes you to the next page. Now our U-bolt was 3 by 8 by 1/2. So these are all the U-bolts, or the spring clips as they call them. These are all the U-bolts that they offer, which is great. So I'm looking for 3 by 8 or actually a 1/2 by 8 by 3. So let's go down our little list here. Let me zoom in. Let's look for an 8. There's 1/2 by 8 by 3 right there. Let's go a little, and as you'll notice, there's no other. Well, here's a 5/8 by 8. That's not it. Going down there. There's a 9/16 by 8. That's not it. We're a 1/2 by 8 by 3, and right there. Where did she go? Right there. 1/2. Where am I here? Okay, here we are. 1/2 by 8 by 3. Round U-bolt with nuts that come in it. Those are flange nuts that tighten up on their own, and they're going to cost me. This is a 1/2 inch, and 0.50 by 8 by 3. They're going to cost me $11.25 a piece. So that's $11.25 times 4. Small price to pay to keep the rear end in the car.